Hi, my name is Pavas Mehra. I work with equity sales at Pareto Securities, and with me today I have Dan Akschuti, life science analyst at Pareto. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
So Dan, you've been working with us at Pareto since August of this year. Could you please give us a little bit more about your background before we move on to the actual subject?
Yeah, sure. So I was working before in Novartis in Basel, Switzerland, in drug development, in early and late stage development, also with various kinds of molecules. And I got interested in biotech stocks, and this is how I found my way to Pareto.
Yeah. So Dan, you earlier this week published a report of a Swedish biotech company called PledPharma. Not this week, last week. And we have a buy rating with a target price of SEK 58. The stock is currently trading around SEK 18, which corresponds to a market cap slightly below 1 billion SEK. We're going to have some subject that we're going to discuss today. We will look at how the company has changed over the past couple of years. We will also see what they're discuss what they're trying to treat and how the drug works. And we will talk a little bit about the forecast that we have for their lead drug PledOx's phase 3. Finally, we will try to sum it up by looking a bit on the market and the triggers ahead. So starting off, what has actually changed in Pled? Because the company has been around since 2006.
Yeah, so there have been some exciting changes since then, especially in 2017. Large parts of the management team have been changed. So we have a new CEO, CFO, and CMO, and as well Vice President Product Strategy and Development in the company, and they bring key experience from various areas, from pharma, Ilmas as a healthcare analyst, and Stefan and Christian bring also extensive clinical experience, and also experience from negotiating with health authorities, which we think is really important. And Niklas, the CEO, has a really good overview of the whole process that goes into bringing that drug to the market. And we can also see on the graph to the left that so far the new management team has delivered on everything they promised.
Yeah, and apart from the management, of course, they have also made some changes to both the drug and also the clinical design. Could you comment on that?
Yes, sure. So the original drug, mangophotipir, was used as an MRI, a contrast agent, and so what PledPharma did is they stabilized the manganese release in this drug, and also patented this as a composition of matter patent, and so we have a drug improvement. And at the same time, which is key for the clinical trials, is that the health authorities have more and more accepted the patient-reported outcomes, which is now the primary endpoint of their pivotal program.
Yeah. So what they are trying to treat is called chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, as we call it, CPN.
Yes.
What does that actually mean?
So CPN, it's a typical side effect of chemotherapy, one of the many, unfortunate. And the symptoms include burning pain in hands and feet, and numbness and tingling, and sensitivity issues, as well as other secondary problems that come with that, including depression, anxiety, and these can become really severe, that they're impairing the daily life, and can lead to disabilities, and also can be life-threatening. Yeah.
And basically their lead drug that addresses this issue is called PledOx, and as we see it, the difference from the competitors or the alternatives is that PledOx actually addresses the cause of the problem and not only the symptoms. Could you please tell us how it actually works?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really unique, and there is no other drug in the pipeline for that. And the others, they try to relieve the pain. So what PledOx is doing, so we have the mitochondria, which are damaged in chemotherapy, and these mitochondria are the energy plants in our cells. So that's where the oxygen that we breathe actually gets burned. Yeah. And under chemotherapy conditions, there is a high level of these radical oxygen species that are produced there, and they damage the cells. And what PledOx is doing is neutralizing these radical oxygen species. Yeah. and like that preventing the cells from dying.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there is a big unmet need in the market for a solution to this issue. Could you comment on this slide briefly?
Yeah, I think the unmet medical need can be best illustrated by looking at the many clinical trials that are directly addressing CPN, and we found 49 are being active right now.
Yep.
There are even more that are including that non-directly. And what is also interesting to see is that most of the trials are investigator-sponsored, so it really shows that there is a high need from physicians to treat their patients somehow.
Yeah.
And what we can also see is the high frequency of drug prescriptions to manage these symptoms, and we found some numbers from a Japanese study, and we see that opioids are prescribed up to 83% of the patients.
Yeah.
And other drugs, like anti-epileptic drugs, are also popular to be described for treating the numbness and pain.
Yeah. And what would you say could be the key value driver in this case when it comes to the phase 3 predictions?
That's important, really an important question. So, if you look at the current valuation, it's kind of linked to the phase 2 results. And if you look at the phase 2 results on their primary endpoint, which was a physician-reported outcome, they actually failed. So we see insignificant p-values. But this physician-reported outcome was measured during the cycles, and we know from epidemiologic studies that the chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathies, they increase with every cycle and even beyond once the treatment is completed.
Mm-hmm.
And since we know now that patient-reported outcomes are accepted by the health authorities, then we can look at the patient-reported data from the Pliant phase 2 trial, and there we see. So these numbers are from 6 months after the last dose, and we see here highly significant results in the p-values. And in the mid-dose, we can see a 88% reduction of the risk to experience severe CPNs in the PledOx group. So that's a really strong result. And now PledPharma took these data, and as well as some other data from the Scott study, and designed their phase 3 program according to that. So they're targeting the best possible time point that they can, based on both the Scott study as well as the Pliant trial. And this is flanked here by 3 and 6 months from the phase 2 data. So we can, with high confidence, say that the trial has been designed for success.
So what you are trying to highlight in this report is that more focus should be put on the patient-reported outcome, which has been really significant to the study.
Yes, exactly. So if you look at this data from the phase 2 and that their phase 3 is aiming at that, then there is an extremely high chance for success.
And moving on, of course, could you please explain a little bit about the market potential for PledOx?
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at our most base case, then we look at just the oxaliplatin treated patients in colorectal cancer, and there we come to 1.6 million cycles. And if we assume a pricing of $1,000 per cycle, we end up at 1.6 billion. And if we adjust it for some factors, we end up at least slightly over $1 billion.
Yeah. And this is, of course, the base case based on oxaliplatin, but there is, of course, a further potential in this for PledOx.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the market potential is much bigger also with the initial label, because we see the physicians are actively looking for other options, and there are no other options. So we actually see the physicians most likely to use it off-label already early. But we can look at the other platinum-based drugs and at the taxane drugs and also other chemotherapy regimens, and then we see the market potential is actually several billion more. Yeah.
Okay, moving on, of course, Pled is also working on Alidot, which is another product in their portfolio. Could you please comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Alidot is based on the same compound, calmangafotipir, as PledOx. And it's addressing the need of preventing severe liver damage in paracetamol overdose patients. And this is, one would not believe, the leading cause of acute liver failure in US and Western Europe.
Yep.
We have around 100,000 cases in the UK alone annually. And the current standard of care only acts in the first phase of this overdosing, in the metabolic phase.
Mm-hmm.
But Aladote can work in the oxidative phase, and that's around after 8 hours of the overdose. So we see there also an unmet need coupled with a very good scientific rationale.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we see the market here as much smaller compared to PledOx.
Yeah, and also the focus is mostly on PledOx for now, but this is of course another option that is included for PledPharma.
And it also shows a bit the potential of PledPharma's compound to go also into other indications.
Yeah.
So they don't need to stop at paracetamol overdose.
Yeah. And just to tie this together, what are the triggers ahead?
So the biggest trigger, of course, will be the phase 3 results. So we expect top-line data in Q4 of 2020, and based on what we see from the enrollment, we believe that they will deliver on time.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have competition for patients in the enrollment. There are no other players currently. And what we can also see, as we saw just very recently, is our licensing agreements. So the Solasia agreement was expanded to taxanes and also other chemotherapy regimens. And so that might be imminent for other regions, so we don't know. So it could be that they announce an agreement for US with a big pharma company.
Yep.
We know that the other companies big pharma companies are active in cancer supportive care, and personally, I believe that the biggest value would come with a deal post phase 3 results, because the chance for success is really high.
All right.
But if the pharma would see that similar, they could negotiate good royalty rates also before the results. Yeah, so this is something that could come any day. Yeah. We can't predict that.
Yeah. So basically, quite interesting times ahead for PledPharma. And to take part of the complete report that Dan has published, you can either contact your sales representative or go into paretosec.se for Swedish clients or paretosec.no for Norwegian clients. That was our full view of PledPharma. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.